college football as well that I want to get into because, man, what a weekend it was. And I'm going to start with the SEC conference overall because we've talked about the Big 12 in past weeks just eating each other up, right? The Pac-12 is known for it. The Pac-12 is known for cannibalizing itself. All the best teams lose once, twice, three times. And that's partly why the Pac-12 is not really looked upon in the same light as is the SEC, as is the Big Ten. Is because part of the reason why is because the Pac-12 never really has many playoff contending teams because they all beat each other. And they're all on late at night, but they all also beat each other, so there's no reason to tune in late at night. Now, because there's no other option but to play yourself, teams are playing and conferences are playing conference-only schedules because of the pandemic. So you have no other option but to beat yourself, but to eat yourself. And even the SEC, the big bad SEC, the litmus test for all the other conferences of how great they want to be, the gold standard for college football conferences. Even the SEC is not immune to chaos. Texas A&M started the chaos going, upset number 4 Florida on Saturday, 41-38. And they join now the likes of the Big 12 and the Pac-12 of chaos erupting really at any place and anywhere. For the most part, we always see the SEC as kind of immune to chaos. They are always that conference that always is very top-heavy. The teams in the bottom may stink more than any other team. Now, the Pac-12, for the most part, 1 through 12, is pretty much, there's not too much of a talent gap. The teams at the bottom are never really the worst teams in the league. The teams at the top are never the best in all of college football. The SEC is a total opposite. They have 2 or 3 great teams, top 5 teams in the country, and their bottom teams are bad. Vanderbilt comes to mind. Arkansas can be in that conversation up to this year. But now even the SEC is not immune. Texas A&M landed the first upset. They landed the first punch, kind of dropped the first grenade, as you will, to lessen some of the top heaviness of the SEC. And guess what? This won't be the last time this happens. The SEC is actually a deep conference this year, which sure on the surface sounds like, okay, of course they're a deep conference. They have great teams. It's a gauntlet. But the teams in the bottom, outside of Vanderbilt, are getting better. And that's not a good thing. That's not what the SEC wants. So while the SEC loves to be top heavy. They want Alabama at the top of the rankings. They want Florida. They want Georgia. They want as many teams in the top of the rankings as possible. What they don't want is what happens to the Big 12. What happened to the Pac-12. As everyone beats each other, and in doing so, you lessen the perception of the conference overall on a national level. I mean, on the same day you had A&M beat Florida, number 14 in the country, you had Auburn escape a near collapse against Arkansas. You had the Golden Child, the Golden Goose, Alabama, almost fall to the hands of Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Auburn kicks a game-winning field goal with 7 seconds left in just a slop fest against Arkansas, who's proven me a lot tougher than they were really in the last 3 or 4 years. Credit to Sam Pittman coming in and changing the culture of Arkansas. Alabama had to fight off and continually had to kind of put Ole Miss down because Ole Miss just kept coming offensively. They kept scoring points. And Ole Miss scored 48 points. And their defense is god-awful. It's one of the worst in the college football. So it's not a shock they allowed 63. But they can score. Lane Kiffin can drop some good plays. And the last thing the SEC wanted as a conference was for Florida to lose, was for Auburn to lose, was for Alabama to lose. And all of a sudden, there's questions of how good the SEC truly is. This also, to me, is a great example of why the SEC plays 8 conference games, while the Big 12, while the Big 10, and while the Pac-12 play 9. This highlights why the SEC wants to play at the least amount of conference games possible, because it ensures less losses overall as a conference, and it helps to build up these better teams to get that nice record and prevent the conference from eating each other like it is this year. If they could play less than 8 games, conference games, they would probably do it. Because that means you can schedule more FCS teams. You can schedule more week out-of-conference games to give yourself more wins to pad the stats. So this was just another weekend in college football. It shows you even the big bad SEC, not immune from chaos. Because really, outside of, I'm going to exclude Vanderbilt because they've been just god-awful. Missouri upset LSU. I apologize for not even including them in this conversation. Any team outside of Vanderbilt shows they can hang with any team on a given Sunday or a given Saturday. Not what the SEC wants. Quickly to Florida. I still have faith Florida can win the SEC East. I still think this offense, led by Kyle Trask, when push comes to shove, when they play Georgia in a few weeks, I think that they'll be ready to go, answer the bell, and be the difference. They still have a month, essentially, before that game to figure out their defense. The defense stinks. Flat out stinks. They lost in the game Saturday against Texas A&M. The defense will hold them back. But they have a month to get it together, figure it out before they play the biggest game on the schedule against Georgia to determine who will go to the SEC conference title game. I'm not concerned about Florida. Not concerned. How about the ACC? We'll go to the ACC. Kings stay Kings. Here's Saturday night. Clemson, Miami. Number 1 versus number 7. Highly anticipated matchup. Clemson showed why, yet again, year after year, no matter the hype, no matter what team is trying to chase them and knock them off their pedestal this year, they flex and showed why they are the top dogs in the ACC. Now, Miami, they had a nice start to their season. A little bumpy to start, but they blew out Louisville. They blew out Florida State. De'Ara King coming in with Rhett Lashlee as a new offensive coordinator. Miami actually competent on offense. They actually looked like a 2020 offense. They were stuck in the 1980s for a very long time. They could not get competent quarterback play. They could really not get competent offensive play. So De'Ara King changed that. Rhett Lashlee changed that. Were they as good as their 7th ranking in the country? I'd probably say no. That was obviously very inflated by not everyone playing right now. But Clemson on Saturday night came out, flat out bullied Miami's offense. Just bullied them. Punched them in the mouth, didn't let them get anything going, and they showed again why they are the kings of the ACC. Now, overall, the conference has improved compared to the last year and the last few years because the ACC, from top to bottom, is one of the worst conferences, if not the worst, out of the Power 5. They have Clemson and everyone else is bad, like really bad. So they added Notre Dame this year, which really helps their strength of schedule. North Carolina is on the rise. They're recruiting really well. They're solid so far. I think they're still a year or two away. Get those guys in there, get the good players on the field. But Mac Brown is doing an incredible job of rebuilding and retransforming, I should say. If I can talk, that'd be great. North Carolina to be a perennial contender soon. So they're not as bad. The depth is getting a lot better as it was in past years. But Saturday night just highlights to me, the gap between Clemson and everyone else is very wide. The rest of the ACC from 2 to 14, maybe tightening, maybe getting better. Maybe that gap is closing between the worst team and the second best team. But that gap between the second best team and Clemson is still very large and very wide. Clemson, again, showed on Saturday why Kings stay Kings. How about the college football playoff? I know it's very early to start thinking about the college football playoff. The rankings don't come out for another month. We don't even have everyone playing yet. The Big Ten plays in 2 weeks. The Pac-12 will play in a few weeks after that. But I want to kind of just at least get you prepared and get you embraced to what to expect this college football playoff to be once we get to 4 teams. Because in the past, right, when it first started back in 2014 up until this past season, the formula, the resume you needed to have was basically be undefeated, maybe have one loss, but have it be a close loss, a tight loss to a really good team. And then you somehow hope that really good team either isn't in your own conference, isn't in your own division. You at least get to your conference title game. But undefeated was always kind of the resume or the route you had to go. Again, maybe you get lucky in 1 year. You have one loss, you can revenge that loss, really pad your resume and give yourself a chance. That's really what it came down to. Anything after one loss, you're done. Your season's over. Pack it up. We'll see you next year. I don't think that's going to be the case this year so far. Now, again, it's still early. We still have 2 months to go before the rankings come out finally, and we have our 4 teams playing for the college football playoff. Again, the Big Ten still hasn't even kicked off their season yet. And the Pac-12, if they can try to get someone in, now that's a whole other discussion. But, hey, they're going to try to get someone in. They still haven't played yet. So a lot can happen. But really, outside of Clemson so far, because, again, I think the gap between Clemson and everyone else in the ACC is still very wide. So outside of Clemson, I think going undefeated this year for any team is going to be extremely tough. Extremely tough. So I think a lot of these teams are going to have one loss going in. One loss on the resume. They'll be fighting about which loss is better. But usually, we see Alabama undefeated. Usually we'll see Oklahoma either undefeated or with one loss but win their title. Or win their conference championship, I should say. And they'll get in. Clemson, we know, is usually undefeated. I think we have to change our expectations this year to think about what are we going to expect and what really would rule out being out of the playoff. Because before, the formula was 2 losses. Once you get your second loss, you're done. No 2-loss team has ever made the playoff. I think that's going to change this year. Because we just saw in the SEC alone, right, the gold standard of conferences. Alabama had a near scare against Ole Miss. Auburn, although they lost already, need to squeak one out against Arkansas, one of the worst teams, in theory, we thought coming into this year in all of college football. They're proving that not to be the case. Maybe they're a lot better than we thought. Florida, number 4 in the nation, falls to Texas A&M. LSU, again, already one loss, but they lose to Mizzou. There's landmines up and down the SEC conference, meaning that really any game could be a tripwire for Alabama, for Georgia, for Florida again. So I think now, 2 losses doesn't exactly rule you out of the season, rule you out of the playoff. For the Big 12, maybe, that'd be a different story. For the Big 10, maybe that could be a different story because they're playing less games. If you're in the ACC, if you're in the SEC, this could be a year where 2 losses and you're still right in the mix. You're still 1 or 2 breaks away from making the playoff. There's going to be a wild year. It already has been a wacky year. And I expect more chaos, more zaniness, more craziness. And speaking of which, to finish off here my thoughts on this college football Saturday. Speaking of zaniness, craziness, wildness, how about that Red River game? Oklahoma and Texas. To me, watching that game, almost 5 hours, mind you. Talk about pace of play. We are here about in baseball. The NFL is trying to speed their game up, and here's Texas and Oklahoma playing almost a 5-hour game. Watching that game, to me, perfectly encapsulated why college football is the best sport on God's green earth here. You had amazing plays up and down the field from both teams. Sam Ehlinger, not the biggest fan of his. Don't get me wrong. He made some nice plays on Saturday. Great runs, great throws. Spencer Rattler had an up and down game, but he made some nice throws. So you had amazing plays from both sides. You had some mind-numbing plays. Spencer Rattler throwing some bad picks early on. You had some big plays. You had college kickers coming in. You had a block kick in overtime. You had a missed kick to win the game in overtime from Oklahoma. Obviously, you had the rivalry aspect mixed in there. Two teams that don't like each other, 2 fan bases, even though the Cotton Bowl wasn't as filled as it normally would be. Still a very solid atmosphere for the about, looked like 20% filled. It had everything. It had ups, it had downs, it had excitement, it had depression. To me, that, if you try to, or someone doesn't understand just the craziness of college football and why it's the best, you just play that game and have them sit back and watch it. Because it's wild. You never know what to expect. You never know what's going to happen. When you rely on 18 and 22-year-old kids to execute consistently, that's never the case. And that's why massive plays happen. That's why bad decisions happen. Things you'll never think you'll see on a football field happen. That's what makes it crazy. That's what makes it fun. In the game, honestly, let's call it what it is. Meaningless for the most part for the playoff discussion. Lost a lot of juice because both teams are coming off losses. Oklahoma was 1-2 going to that game, which is crazy. Texas was for a big year for them, significantly underachieved. Now they have 2 losses, excuse me. But still, despite that, it was an awesome back and forth game to watch. It was so much fun. And that's just, again, why, to me, college football is king. The craziness that you have there just shows why the chaos is the best. You honestly never know what to expect. And it was so much fun. And I didn't even have a dog in the fight. It was awesome. Awesome to watch.